Thank you all, and good evening to this opening night of the IMPAKT Festival 2026, themed Techno-Ancestrality. It's great to be here with so many of you, art lovers, friends and supporters of IMPAKT, and of course also all the artists and speakers involved in the festival that we're about to start. We're here in Theater Utrecht, a very familiar place to us when it still was called Het Huis Utrecht, and we're very happy that we're receiving the same kind of hospitality here. Now Theater Utrecht is managing this venue. So this is where, in the upcoming days, you can see many performances, screenings, artist talks and discussions, artist presentations, mostly all of them connected to Techno-Ancestrality, but quite a big lot of them are also connected to the project that is actually at the origin of this year's IMPAKT Festival. And it's called WenTech. WenTech is a project funded by the European Union within the STARTS program. And it is a project that brought together, and still brings together, artists and organizations and communities from South America and Europe. And over the past year, we've been working closely together to allow artists to make new works grounded in South America and addressing actually, which is also very much the theme of this year's festival, Techno-Ancestrality, is how can we learn from ancestral knowledge to see technology in a different way, in a way that is maybe more human, or maybe in a way that is more sustainable and better for the planet that we live on. Before I hand over to Akin, standing here next to me, Akin and I have been working very hard for the past year to make this festival happen and to curate it together. But before I hand over to Akin, I would like to say a few words of thanks to the people that have made this festival possible. And of course, that is the European Union that I just already mentioned, but it's also our funders from the Netherlands, the Creative Industries Fund, the City of Utrecht, het Cultuurfonds and het KF Heijnfonds. Also, I would like to thank V2, Lab for Unstable Media in Rotterdam. And it's a collaboration with V2 that we are hosting and organizing tonight's keynote from Payal Arora, about which Akin will tell you a lot more. After Payal's performance, after Payal's keynote, we'll have a performance, and also that will be further introduced to you by Akin. Before I hand over the microphone to Akin, I would like to ask you for a warm applause for all the artists and organizations making this possible.
Thank you, Ariane. Thank you so much, and thanks everyone for being here. I guess I should start first with an introduction. I am the co-curator of this year's IMPAKT Festival, Techno-Ancestrality. My name is Edward Akintola Hubbard. I'm an anthropologist, an artist, and a curator, and I'm the artistic director of an artist collective called Dark Matter, which is based in Amsterdam, Rotterdam, and Middelburg. And I want to just say a few words about how we got here tonight. Techno-Ancestrality, as Ariane pointed out, sort of grew out of a project that was based on indigeneity and indigenous people and indigenous cultural production in South America. And so our job was to expand this scope internationally and to examine ancestral knowledge as something that occurs everywhere among all people. So what we decided to do first and foremost was to expand the notion of technology that we use, the everyday notion of technology as this sort of futuristic, extractive, gadgetry. And we decided to look more at local, culturally embedded, situated practices that involve technologies that have passed down from generation to generation. This year, we are proud to say we have a representation of artists and thinkers and performers and many other kinds of participants in the festival, as you'll see over the next few days, from almost every continent in the world. And so that's something we're extremely proud of. And what we just want to do here is to make this discursive program be about conversation and about thinking, and thinking through new ways of how technology can be rethought and understood in different ways, ways that people have been using them for generations and generations. So, without further ado, I will introduce our first keynote. Payal Arora, who is sitting in front. Payal is a professor of inclusive AI cultures at Utrecht University. She's the co-founder of FemLab, a feminist future of work initiative. She's a digital anthropologist, fellow anthropologist. Welcome, a TEDx speaker. And she is the author of several award-winning books, including The Next Billion Users, published on Harvard University Press, and her upcoming, her book, From Pessimism to Promise, Lessons from the Global South on Designing Inclusive Tech, which will be published on MIT Press and HarperCollins India. She has about 2 decades of user experience and ethnographic knowledge looking at everyday media practices of young people in the global South. And her expertise is in digital cultures, cross-cultural AI ethics, and inclusive design. Please welcome Payal Arora.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. All right. I'm going to do more for performance now that I've got the idea in my head. So, I want to speak a little bit about the space of quietness. But before we go into it, I have a few questions for you. How many of you have gone online in the last day? Raise your hands. Okay. Last hour. How many of you are right now on your mobile? Okay, all right. Let's do a flip, okay? How many of you have actually tried to get offline in the last few months? Like really tried? Okay, quite a few of you, right? How many of you have actually succeeded? How long? A day? Anyone longer than a day? 2 days. 2 days. Anyone long? Who can do better? Scream. That's it? Okay. All right, look, I think I heard something, no? Okay, all right. Look, this is a legitimate feeling, right? That we need to slow down. We are literally saturated 24/7 online, or at least we feel like it, right? We feel like we are always on, right? That term of, am I always on? Yes, we are. So this need to actually rehumanize ourselves, particularly, reclaim ourselves from the digital. Totally legitimate, totally there. But there's another story, there's another reality which is just as compelling, and that is this urgent need to get online, and be online at any cost, all the time, 24/7, all right? So I have some interesting numbers for you. 40. 40 is the number of days that the Islamic regime has cut off the internet for the Iranian people, and it's still going strong, right? 313, the number of internet shutdowns in 2025 alone, the highest we've ever had, and is estimated to go higher, right? And 52, the number of countries that it's impacted, which is more than half the world's population. So, these numbers are really powerful, but they don't quite capture the pain of forced silence, right? This weekend, I got an email from an Iranian colleague of mine who said, she's supposed to come for a festival in June, but she can't because she was literally crying while she read one of the emails from another Iranian colleague. And let me read a little part of that message. So this is a message from her colleague. It says, when we talk about internet shutdowns, we look at graphs. Traffic drops to zero. We count the hours offline and we cite the economic damage in big aggregate numbers, and then we move on. But there's a woman I follow on Instagram. She lives in a village in Iran, and she posts videos of herself cooking and just living somewhere that most of us would never see or know existed. I don't know her name, but I know her hands in her kitchen. There's an artist in Esfahan, in one of the most beautiful old houses you've ever seen, and who used Instagram to get commissions to earn money to show her art. These people are often not in anyone's data sets. We are very critical of algorithms, and sometimes rightly so. But we have not looked at what access to an algorithm actually means for someone without resources. An algorithm can find your audience for you. It found that woman in her village and brought her to me on the other side of the world. For a lot of people, that is everything. Everything, right? So it got me thinking, how do we measure the everything for the somebody out there, right? What is the value of visibility? Or how do we even calculate silence, right? So these are the kinds of questions that go into the library of the Incalculable, a project between me and V2, the Institute for Unstable Media, where we are really trying to ask questions of what does it actually mean to be human in the age of AI? Whose stories count and why? Should things be calculated or not? And what does it mean to be included or excluded as part of this data storytelling, right? So part of the library of the Incalculable is to really talk about places, things, people, most of them who are deemed incalculable. Not because they are so beyond comprehension, but it's more that they don't have any recognized commercial value for algorithmic systems, right? So the incalculable is not a deficit, it's not an absence, but actually it's really an ode to the beauty and complexity of humanity, of that which defies capture, right? So what we do is we basically have been building a sort of a catalog of the library. So we are taking a lot of terms like access, artificial intelligence, human-centered, name it. I mean, universal, visual, all these like basic terms which we all have a shared understanding of. And then we use that as a starting point to complicate and pluralize these stories, to make them very unfamiliar to you, right? Because the idea is not to discipline the alphabet, but really about creating the beautiful chaos that these alphabets and these terms and these notions can really, bring forward when we realize that it's not really universal across board, and that's okay, but it is important to put fair weight to that kind of complexity so we recognize and we humble the algorithm that it really is geared towards certain kind of populations, contexts, and it is very steered towards those who have privileges of a multiple kind, right? If you see this image, right, you probably are familiar with, some of you are familiar with it, this is the library of Alexandria in Egypt. It was known in the olden world as one of the most impressive, institutions of knowledge that was ever built. One of the most rich repositories of knowledge and thinking that went into it. And it survived for a long time. But then it got destroyed over wars upon wars, and it completely got burned down, right? And, of course, it was an enormous tragedy to the human knowledge, and it was a destruction of that knowledge. But does that mean it also destroyed the entirety of the Egyptian culture? Obviously not, right? So there is this tendency we have that with every new technology, we tend to overestimate the power of technology and its impact, and we tend to constantly underestimate people and social ingenuity and collectivity and solidarity and what that can do to transforming systems, right? So, what does it actually mean to build the library of the incalculable? There are 3 R's, right? So one is about recognition that there's no such thing as a complete data capture. It's like saying, my love for you is totally captured with an emoticon, right? I mean, whatever I even say or do or express, I can never quite capture the feeling of love that I have towards a place, a person, an object, right? So recognition of that should give us some comfort, right? Then the second is resistance that we cannot allow the techno-capitalistic lens to be the prime way in which we determine what is valuable or not. Obviously not, right? That is just a sliver, a tiny sliver of how we build value into our everyday lives, into our relationship with each other, and to our surrounding. And then the third is that of repair. Of course, we need to make our systems, technological systems, better, right? We're always talking about how do I make our tech better? How do I hold social media responsible? How do I build AI which is more responsible, inclusive, blah, 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 right? But in the end, actually, what we really should be asking is how do we build better social institutions? Because social institutions are always behind technology systems. And, we have become more and more invested in dehumanizing ourselves in these polarizing times. And it's time to sort of reclaim some of that humanity so that gets reflected through these technical systems. Otherwise, what will happen is we'll start to blame and ban mobile phones to fix the problem, right? So let's start with an alphabet, right? Privacy. So how does this actually play out? So, in the last, say 2 decades ago, when privacy was mentioned, when Facebook came about, it was not a real urgent value, by the way. People didn't really take it too seriously. They did polls after polls. It was somewhere in the bottom. Today, privacy is number 1 biggest concern for people, when it comes to tech. So you have laws, you have privacy laws, you have tech laws, all around the idea that it is good. It's a good thing, right? It's an intrinsic positive vibe we get when we talk about privacy. Privacy is protection, and we do optimize and secure algorithms and laws and regulations to protect it. But the assumption underlying that is we have one legitimate choice and we have independent choice, right? So let's test that a bit. So I want you to take yourself and put yourself in this visual. You're behind this mesh, and you are moving through a market. You are experiencing a public life through this mesh. You're seeing people who are your friends. You want to call out, but you can't speak. You want to smile to somebody who you've known for many years. You can't. I mean, you can, but they don't see it, right? And just picture being in this and seeing the whole life filtered through this mesh for not just days, not just weeks, but for years, okay, in public. Do you feel that? What do you actually feel when you put yourself in that, right? So hold on to that feeling, because it is well worth remembering that, 5 years ago, the Taliban basically made women take on the burqa and also excluded them actively from schools, jobs, salons, because that seemed threatening, because God forbid the women will come together at salons, They can't actually stand by a windowsill. Girls can't sing, dance, play a sport. Basically, it's an active and most systematic erasure of women in public life. So in these contexts, privacy may be interpreted as patriarchy. it may be interpreted as extraordinary suffocation because privacy is a relegation of domestic, of the domestic, so you can be quiet and not seen and heard. It's the most powerful way to erase the presence. But that said, women are not mere victims. People are ingenuous with the tools at their disposal, and the digital can be very, very powerful. In a time where the geopolitics don't really care so much about Afghanistan and the women compared to other, more trendier causes, women have taken it to their own hands to make themselves visible. They don't need some sort of poverty porn. They do this in ways that are visceral. So they build their stories around images like this, posing next to instruments they used to play but can't play. And then they share stories like here, Hura, who dresses up at home. And she talks about, she wanted to be a diplomat and was studying public relations and journalism before universities were closed. She says, all doors are closed to girls, all the doors to getting married is open. I'm afraid of this door. What makes my mood so much better is that I can take videos and photos of myself and post them. She said, her nose piercingly visible. So she appears in a low-cut blue velvet dress, her hair down, and singing in a country where music is effectively banned. So she plays this, and by the way, in my work, over the last 2 decades, I notice a lot of women, the more conservative a culture, the more they play around at home. And the digital is one of their most powerful friends because they reach a world which is beyond their context and conditions of suffocation, of oppression, and are able to really reify themselves and rehumanize themselves through these, acts. Another story where music of exiled stars, right? Where Shahoga, 22, is living in a major city and she was supposed to be a teacher. Of course, she can't go to school. So I'd like to go back to those days to be able to walk, to see my friends. So to cheer myself up, I listen to music, watch cooking shows. I listen to songs by Ariana, Saeed, and Farhad, Daria, she says, of stars who left Afghanistan. And then another story about a woman who loves books and she downloads and shares it with other women. The books I usually read are about women who have seen a lot of hardships. Their stories motivate me to keep going. And this goes on and on. Each of these, notice that, is like something like 4.8, 5. Like there's this active way in which they're keeping these stories alive. And the digital in this context is not something that people want to go off on. This is their lifeline. This is their only way sometimes for them to stop them from killing themselves, actually. So what I'm trying to say here, of course, is that, the algorithm can be oppressive, but in these contexts can be a lifeline and a friend to people. So let's take authenticity, another, term which seems pretty fuzzy and nice, right? In tech speak, it means you need to really have fidelity of data to the provenance, context, and conditions of its production. Or in layman's speak, we are asking about, is this real? Is this deepfake? Is this, what can I trust, right? So we really are looking for what is authentic. So here's an image for you. Again, another, I don't know, how many of you, can you raise your hands of how many of you have seen this image? Some of you. Do you know where it's from? Anyone? UK? Anyone? Yeah?
This is from Iran.
Iran? Okay. Anyone? All right. So this actually is from Toronto. So it's not from Iran, but it's an Iranian woman who actually, and I have to say, I also thought it was from Iran because it became one of the most viral photos to represent the women life freedom movement. And so this became the poster child visual, which is really a powerful visual, right? So it's understandable because these were the kinds of acts that were anyway going on in Iran. It wasn't so far off. because there were equally beautiful images coming from and powerful images coming from Iran. But this was actually done by a student in Toronto showing her solidarity for the movement. And by itself, this doesn't make this image lesser than, now that we know it's from Toronto, right? It just shifts the meaning of this image. It means that it is a signal of solidarity from afar, right? But what is disturbing is when it becomes an image which is a proxy of courage on the ground. Because then what this context collapse does is that it actually deprives the genuine bravery and courage that it takes to do this very act in Iran itself, where it literally has been deadly for many, many people like her, right? And so the images, now that is from Iran, one of the many, many images which took enormous amounts of bravery to take off their burqa and show their middle finger to the Ayatollah. And we know this could cost them their lives, right? And we know that. We've been seeing this. So these are not small acts. These are basically archives of agency. It is a curation of courage. It is very much these kind of little micro acts that accumulate into a sort of a library of storytelling, particularly in this age of digital silence, right? So internet, another like, oh, yawn word, you know? It's like, it's so 1990s. Who wants to talk about the internet, right? So, and understandable. How can this be more interesting? So it's all about AI now. So, you know, meet Jeroen van der Loon, who's an artist who actually in 2009 was so obsessed with the internet and was reusing it a lot to a point where he got burnt out and he was having physical issues. So he's like, all right, I'm actually going to get off. And he actually, by the way, succeeded far more than all of us, is he took off for 4 months, got offline, and then he wondered, well, it became so much part of his life that he wondered, how do people picture what the internet is in their lives? Like, how do they see it, right? So he decided to travel around the world, and he started to have these little meetings and, you know, engage with people, and he just asked them a simple question. What does the internet mean to you? And can you do a handwritten letter and tell me? Just think about it and I'll just collect it. He did this for 15 years, collecting over 1,500 letters from all over the place, right? About stories, about just what did it mean to them. And here are some interesting ones, right? So this is an exhibit he had more recently. In, I think, Amsterdam, but he's been doing it around the Netherlands. And here is, you know, Life Needs Internet as a project. And here are some of the letters. And this is actually very moving. And we won't go into details, but here, one of these letters from Zimbabwe is about he met his girlfriend online, and then later he spent the Christmas with her in New York. And when he dropped out of high school, being in online spaces helped with my loneliness. You know, Harare is not the place, you know, not the, oh, I can't understand that right now. But either way, he said, I felt quite isolated, as there's nothing to do at school. And so this is a lot about connecting online for romance, but also feeling like the digital is able to take him out of his loneliness, right? Or another is, I'm a father of 3 kids and a husband, and my wife and 2 of my children are profoundly dyslexic. Not like dyslexic like everyone else says they are, almost completely word blind. Yes, I know that ChatGPT is evil, blah, 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 but to them, it is a game changer. They can speak into their phone and get it to do all of these tasks that normal people do. You know, emails, reading, recipes, ideas. Imagine a world where you could not read a menu. Now they can. The internet is a device that, you know, removes their disability. Now that's like super, like inspiring. And so these letters upon letters. And so what he found is one of the interesting patterns is that, despite our gloom doom around the internet and new technologies, actually, majority of people find deep value, and particularly from the global south. The more remote, the more lonely, the more hard-pressed, the more conservative, more patriarchal. These are the conditions that want the internet even more than ever, which makes us realize that, pessimism is a privilege for those who can afford to despair. The rest of the world has to have it because relational to their everyday lives, it is just so much more fueling, so much more rehumanizing, right? And let's take about the word de-bias. Now, de-bias, by now, everyone's kind of like, yes, I know the internet's not neutral, data is not neutral. It's been rammed into our heads, right? We know that data can be sexist, racist, biased in all kinds of ways. And also, data sets that are going into the training of AI can influence the outputs, which means that it can not just reproduce bias, but amplify bias, right? So we know this. But what does it mean to de-bias? Is like, in computer speak, it's just like erasing a lot of the biases to make it much more quality data, right? But de-biasing is not just about making better data by expanding the data sets, but it's more about ensuring that you're recruiting people who have been systematically marginalized or erased or historically excluded, and working with them to be represented, how they don't have to fit into the capitalistic system where they are easily commercializable, right? So meet Siddhi Gupta. She is a design educator in India, and she worked with many of these communities in India to make them, work with them to see how did they want to be, visible and heard. So the idea is to revive the Creative Commons by, diversifying. What does it look like to be an Indian woman in Rajasthan, in a rural place? She starts off by looking online with them on their little place called Aspura. They realize they don't exist on the Google Maps. Actually, what about Google search results? Well, one thing comes up, which is a Jaipur loom, which is a company that exports carpets there. So the women got really mobilized and saying, well, we want ourselves because we all have mobile phones. We want Aspara there. We also want to mark our water tank because we like it, our school, our park. What about this cow shed where we all get together every evening? So they start to work on that, right? And then they want to click photos because they used Imagine and they prompted and they got so frustrated. They're like, well, they look so depressed. And they're like, we are not these people. I mean, none of these tools, they tried all sorts of tools, Firefly, Gemini AI, and none of it really got them. Either they over-romanticize them like some sort of Tibetan, monastery, or that these women were like faceless, distorted, and just couldn't capture them, right? And so they decided to, take their own photographs and populate in the Creative Commons. They wanted to be smiling. This was their place of work. Their homes oftentimes are the places of work. So, they got all these photos, and then they started to go into the curation of which ones would make it, which ones would represent them. And they had vicious conversations saying, no, this is the best way to represent us. And so this whole curational, social curation went into this process of reviving the Creative Commons. And then they had an exhibit for the village to showcase what their village is supposed to look like by them and for them. And having much conversation around that, right? And so all of this was really, the output was that much of, now if you look up Aspara women in Rajasthan, you will see some more interesting images. And you will, obviously it's not totalizing, obviously it's not a complete picture, right? Obviously there are biases because some women who are louder than others got their way. But actually what was most valuable about the project is the social connections, the revitalization of the community, all of that which will never be quite captured, right? The process itself was what made the project valuable. not necessarily just the visuals on the Creative Commons, right? So, and last is the notion of ethics. Another ethics, it's like in the last year alone, there must have been like hundreds of ethics manifestos. We love ethics manifestos because you don't quite have to act on it. You can just like think about it, right? So it's like ethical AI, how do we do this, responsible AI, et cetera, right? And part of it is that there's a little bit of a pushback because these are such universalizing values. These are such normatives. And it comes down to whose ethics, whose values. It's so devoid and detached from context. And in recent years, there's been a push for a much more indigenous approach to AI, where we can rethink about what does sustainable AI mean and what is responsible AI, and they're interconnected. As we know very well that the more AI is used, the more it's absorbing our planetary resources, and it is deeply extractive in multiple ways, right? So these are not new stories. So what is interesting is that Ubuntu AI is a practice of, the African philosophy of I am because we are. And that's part of it is where they've decided, and here you have Vakani Hoffman, who is a Kenyan, Indigenous Kenyan, children's storyteller, among many other things. And she's part of a project called Ubuntu Folklore Project, where they are populating different folk stories onto a platform, a Ubuntu hub, so they can capture different stories from around Africa, particularly hard to get places. So she goes to the bush where she comes from to be a platform. She uses her privilege as a platform to facilitate these stories. And here's something beautiful that, she says is, I believe a story is a living thing and it lives from one person to the next. When we share stories, we exchange a part of ourselves and carry a piece of each other forward, right? So just to conclude, I want you to imagine what would happen if you were to adopt an alphabet, right? And channel your energies into basically building that alphabet, populating it with words, and then pushing those words into areas of deep uncomfortableness, right? Where you can challenge yourself and others to think about different contexts, conditions, people, and just actually celebrate the diversity of humanity. Because one of the most comforting thoughts, which I'll leave you with, is that humanity is, the heart of it is that which cannot be captured. And we should really, really celebrate that, because that is the essence and the spirit of what it means to be human. So thank you, and I hope to connect with you because we do many of these kinds of projects at the Inclusive AI Lab, and I look forward to engaging with all of you over the questions and after. So thanks. So I'll sit there.
Thank you so much for a fantastic talk. I'm buzzing with questions that I prepared, but now since hearing you speak, they're going in so many different directions. But I guess my first question is more general. Because I've been teaching in my classes about, AI being the sort of new, we had this conversation before, AI being the sort of new Frankenstein's monster. It's this thing we've given life to that is now possibly going to turn around and destroy us. I mean, these are the kinds of doomsday prophecies we get from most of the commentators on the AI revolution. And I guess my first question is, you come with this message of hope and optimism, which is really, really not typical. Why? What is the basis for this hope? What is it? The incalculable? Is that where we locate this hope that you have?
Yeah. So I think part of it is that when we talk about everybody is talking about the Frankenstein, everybody is talking about what we're really talking about is Europe and the US. Okay, let's just. Anyone who's traveled to any place, in the last few months alone, I was in like Oman, I was in India, I was in South Africa. They cannot wait to do more. I mean, go to the India AI Summit. Everyone's like, oh my God, I love AI even more. No, I love AI anymore. I mean, like, they're fighting over, like, ChatGPT is the opposite. It's like, can ChatGPT do everything for me? You know, like, there's this huge hope that, you know, it can actually circumvent chronic barriers. And the thing is, it's not naivete, because the next gut level reaction is like, okay, so people are really naive. They don't know what this actually means. But we Europeans have given so much thought to it because, you know, we really think about these things. Actually, it's not. It's basically, think about it this way. 65 countries in the world criminalize homosexuality, many to the point of death. So if you are gay in Uganda, you know what? You're going to like ChatGPT because it's one of the few places which actually tell you you're not a freak and you're not abnormal, that you don't deserve the death penalty. And that I can, relatively speaking, trust ChatGPT more than my friends, my neighbors, my parents, because I could actually land up dead, right? I think our mind cannot wrap around these contexts. It's so alien to us, which is a good thing. That means we are in a, you know, less than 14% of the world's countries have liberal democracies, and that's also dubious. US is counted under that. So, you know, so that means that we're so seduced by these genuine choices in life that we can actually question and demonize it, right? While, by the way, have you ever heard, like, usually people criticize these while they're using them? You know, like, it's like, you know, the first wave of social media, people are complaining how evil Twitter is to their followers on Twitter, you know? And so the problem is there's a sort of a lack of genuine honesty. We have double standards. We expect the rest of the world to somehow take on alternative tools, get off the internet, get off these extractive systems while we tell them on Zoom and on Twitter and everything else, right? And we take one day off from the internet, maybe, for our mental health. So, you know.
Well, what explains this? Because during your talk, one of the questions I was going to ask you is, well, you know, most of your examples from your writing as well as from your talk tonight from the Global South are these, you know, the kinds of examples you just mentioned that are just a completely different sort of almost embracing of these new technologies like AI. But when you said this thing, and I wrote it down because I thought I need to use this. Pessimism is a privilege for those who can afford to despair. Mm-hmm. I love this. I really love it. Could you dig a little deeper for us? What do you mean by that in terms of that is despair something that comes with our privilege? How?
No, I think so it comes from this, you know, I've been teaching in the Netherlands for the last 15 years, and I've seen students getting darker and darker about the digital, to a point where they actually don't want, they want to get out of it. They say, I don't use AI. AI is massaged into our entire system. So if you have a mobile phone, you have a watch, you have any, you know, you have a computer, you are somehow using it, right? It's also like, have you thought about whenever you use AI, you're killing the planet? But then there's very little reflection on how we consume garments, fast fashion. We are extraordinarily wasteful as a society in Europe and the US. And actually, it's nothing to do with AI. It's basically we need to have a culture of repair, of having a real honest mirror to our face and saying, we need to change the culture of how we actually see ourselves, because there's a sort of moral righteousness in, oh, I didn't use ChatGPT, I got rid of this app, you know, and then we congratulate ourselves. And I think what's worse is we condemn others who do that. So I think that is possibly the most dangerous, because as I mentioned, try telling an Afghanistan woman, hey, I know you got all this value of, you know, sharing all your, like, instruments, etc., cool, but have you thought about how you're feeding the data to Silicon Valley? Don't you feel bad about it? Aren't you like making Mark Zuckerberg rich? So shouldn't you get offline and just stay behind the burqa? Like, right? Just picture having that conversation, or telling some, kid saying, oh, so your government has no jobs for you and you're become a creator and you're making a little money to support your family. But have you thought about the precarious labor that you've been put under, and that you really shouldn't be giving Instagram your data, etc.? So the point is, you have to put yourself into these positions of understanding how this sort of cognitive dissonance is so jarring, where you recognize that, yes, it's not that there's no precarity, that it's not privacy being violated. Of course, data is being used by Silicon Valley and it can be weaponized. All of this is true, but in relation to their current conditions, context, they are making these decisions for themselves, and we are righteously condemning them for these decisions, right? And so I think this is where I'm underlining. And privilege is not a bad thing. Like I mentioned, you can use, one is don't think you deserve it, but actually recognize that if you have privilege, which means power, you can also do good things, right? So this is what I mean. Like, privilege can be an enormously brilliant platform to mobilize and bring the good within and bring stories that have been unheard. And what happens when people combine their privileges, and that it can really transform society. So rather than and lastly, it's like, when have we ever come up with a real idea for social change when you're in despair and, full of depression? You can't even mobilize yourself to act. Where will you mobilize others to, right? So that has to come from a point of generation, from hope, from aspiration for better, right?
Wow, okay. Before we turn to the audience for questions, I just had one last question I feel I really need to ask you. As we were doing research for this, and I read a bit of your book, your upcoming book, The Library of the Incalculable, I was thinking about our thematic for this festival, Techno-Ancestrality. And I mean, I think I see very obvious points of overlap between the two. And I just wanted to hear from you if you also saw that as well, and to kind of elaborate on that, on these points of overlap between what we're calling ancestral knowledge and what you're calling the incalculable.
Yeah, so when we speak about technology, we have an immediacy of the future. We see futurism as technology, right? Which means we think in terms of it being potentially, in a hyper-modernistic place. But when we think about tradition, we think about it holding us back. We think about it the weight of the past. It's something that technology is opposite to. But rather, actually, if we really want resilient systems of the future, we really need to draw from the traditions of the past, because it's the questions we are asking ourselves today about AI is, what does it mean in terms of ownership of data, particularly when generative AI are building these tools? And we won't get very far if we're still thinking in these individualistic, technocratic terms. But we will get further by thinking in terms of, when communities create a practice, for example, an entire village, right, has created an art form. They don't have a individual ownership on it, but it is a village that has created a style of thinking or a song. Many of our cultures are oral cultures. Does that make it less valuable, right? It comes to life through engagement. And the way people think about sharing of ownership is very different. And I think that we can learn something from fair provenance and fair redistribution of value. And a lot of these questions we're asking are actually been addressed in traditional ancestral societies that we deem as sort of outdated. But it's actually very valuable because it can, it can really be one of the key guiding paths for our the way in which we approach these technologies of the future, where it's not just me and my data, but it's our data, which actually is also connected to the planet and to each other. And when we see the interconnectedness of people and things and the planet, then we can think in very different terms in terms of who is responsible, who has ownership, who has redistribution, and whether even ownership is the right framework. So yeah, I think the most important thing is stop thinking about tradition as opposed to technology,
Exactly.
And from there we can get somewhere,
Yeah. Now I'd like to open the floor. We would like to open the floor to questions from the audience. Anyone? Yes, they will toss you this soft cube, and you just speak into it.
Do I need to shout, or does it have a microphone?
It has a microphone, built-in microphone.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. And I'm sure it was a short presentation. I was left wondering about an intermediary state between accepting algorithms, technology, ChatGPT, Facebook, whatever, and going away from them altogether. And my name is Felipe, I'm from Brazil. I like to think in terms of critical appropriation of technology. That is not refusing technology, it's being aware that the use that you make is not necessarily good, but it's a tool that you have at hand, and it's something that needs to be used with awareness of the ill effects, but it's not about just refusing to use. So this idea of critical appropriation instead of just accepting or refusing is one question. And the other comment that I will make, and Akim, you mentioned that this idea of techno-ancestrality came from South America, things that started to emerge there. And I thought it was very interesting when you said that there was this effort in thinking of what it meant to the rest of the world. And to me, being in Brazil, I lived for 5 years in Germany, just as a context. Ancestrality is not something that belongs to a past, to a remote past, but it's about stories that persist. So ancestrality are the stories that keep coming, that keep being part of society. And I mentioned that I lived in Germany for 5 years because when the 70-year-old neighbor scolds a newcomer to the neighborhood because they didn't put the recyclables on the right way, as they do in Germany, to me, that's also ancestrality. It's another generation keeping telling stories that are necessary for the society to keep regenerating itself. So just to think about ancestrality not as something remote in the past, but also something that is being regenerated every day. And I guess in a similar way to think of how can we not only accept the algorithm that can help someone find solace, find comfort, but also can lead people to despair, to depression, to anxiety. And maybe we should go more into opening up the black box and understanding as a society how can we decide what algorithms, and bring a lot more about open source and how to bring more people to decide how these technologies are developed. So.
Sure.
So there was a little mini talk, but it was a nice talk. So yeah, so it's interesting how you're like, yeah, let's get the in between, right? Between I'm going to never use it to yes, let's be practical about usage, right? But I find that very interesting because your tethers of the polarized opposites are not actually real opposite. The real opposite would be I don't want to have anything to do with technology. It's a Frankenstein. The other end is I absolutely love technology, right? To say I love this tool. I love my phone. I can't live without it. And you know what? Again, I think that is much more common, whether we like it or not. We can't, if you leave your phone at home and you go a day without your phone, you're like, Jesus, it just throws you off balance. And you feel disoriented. Why? Are you such an addict? No, it's because it's a lifeline to your family, your friends, your favorite like songs, your ways of coping with your everyday life. And I've been working with young people, particularly in the Global South, for the last 2 decades, and particularly in marginalized communities in like favelas and a lot of slums in India, like rural areas in Namibia for 4 years. We've been doing a lot of these projects, and they don't just are trying to see, okay, yeah, I'm going to use it on my own terms. No, they absolutely love these tools, because guess what? It's like, it gives them more privacy, because many, like something about 2 billion people live in one-room homes with 3 generations. They don't have physical privacy. They step out, every neighbor knows them. I come from India. I remember just walking down the street, I had like 10 aunts tell me, oh my God, I can't believe she wore a half-sleeve shirt. I'm like, I went out for 5 minutes, right? And it was, it's like suffocating when cultures are constantly surveilling you. And we always talk about digital surveillance. We don't see that actually social surveillance can be even more suffocating sometimes. So the digital actually may give you more privacy in relation to your lived realities. So these conditions so alien to us. So I want to emphasize that the real actual opposite is I absolutely love technologies, and where I actually have to tell them, yeah, but you need to be a little more critical. And look, it's like in the end of the day, right? We have to every technology has its full range of possibilities. So nobody's saying you have to accept these tools. Nobody's like, oh, I have to accept Facebook. No, you don't. Facebook is an asshole company. Like, we can push for them to get better, for sure, right? So I think all technologies are always in the becoming. There's no such thing as, oh, we accept them. And, because we use them, we're also building them together. So when we're shifting algorithms, why are young people around the Global South excited? Because guess what? They're 90% of the world's population, and for the longest time they had very little control over, and they still don't, on their states, their systems, the governments they don't have much control. But guess what they have control over? The algorithm, because they've learned how to game it, and then they can reach parts that have never been reached before, because they know how to come up with capitalize on the attention economy, and it's absolutely empowering, and it is a game changer for them. So it really roots you down to thinking, wow, this means differently to different people, and I think that's part of the incalculability, is that for us to understand the different meanings these technologies have, we have to actually really immerse ourselves in an empathetic way on the different conditions people are living with. And trust me, you don't want to. You may want to become a content moderator to actually get to see some really dire situations, and then you realize that we have it quite good, actually. And so I just feel like it'll never be absolutely viscerally captured, but we at least have to have the humility to recognize that we'll never quite understand the spectrum of why people are so in love with these technologies, in particularly the loneliest places, like in Madagascar, which is, by the way, the loneliest country according to the latest polls. And they love ChatGPT because it's one of the most critical coping mechanisms for them to escape their loneliness, right? And we can go on, but yeah.
Yes, any more questions?
I don't know if I can throw it this way.
My English is not so good. I have not everything understand. But I think when there is no internet, ChatGPT, there is no mobile, and you were a man, woman, or a person, and you have lost that things in your mind. You are in the now. And then you you are aware of the now, and you see the other person, that's a different, maybe that is a different way to make contact than you are in the mobile sphere, internet sphere. And I see also much dangerous things about that. And people are, maybe I too, are hypnotized by internet, or there is a direction you go to. And when you lost that direction, you are in the now. And that's another way of human being to be with each other, yes or no. It's for me, it's a very important question, because I see in the now, I see that many people are with the mobile, internet, and hurry on in the society, but they see not really the person who is before the person or behind the person. They run away from the real contact, and that's I make worry about that direction.
Well, I mean, is there nothing to worry about?
No, of course not. I mean, look, it's the opposite. You know, this is another very common thing. If I underline why we need to, you know, recognize it as a commitment to hope. Optimism is not naivety. It's a commitment to hope. And, you know, it's a commitment to change, right, for the better. And that makes a difference. So it's the way people are like, oh, so you don't care about the harms that it does? It basically means, if I can even flip it, that means you don't want to recognize all these different stories and they don't matter because your story is more important. So why did they become less valuable? So we have to, you know, be fair in terms of who gets to put more weight on what. But going to your question is absolutely right. You know, but here's a hopeful, because I'm on the tradition of, I'm on the trajectory of hope, is that basically, you know, things have changed pretty fast, right? When the mobile phones came, everyone was going out and like answering their phones, and very quickly it became a social faux pas that you can't answer your phone when you're outside with your friends, right? I remember when I went to India and a movie theater, people were answering their phones. Like when mobiles just came in the middle of the movie, everyone was talking, and then they're like, hang on, this is really shitty, because everyone was picking up their phones. And within like a week or so, it became a social rule. And I feel like we tend to be underestimate, you know, the new generations. When you talk to the teenagers, you know, they think it's us, the older generation, including me, who are obsessed about the online. They are not as obsessed. They actually, parents, and this is a recent Economist article, which said that actually the ones who have the biggest problem are the older generations. And young people are telling the parents, can you please put the phone away? So, you know, and that is something, you know what we're afraid of is ourselves. Because if we are addicted, we project it onto these teenagers. And so this is the most hopeful thing, is they look at us and like, I don't want to be them, which is good.
Any other questions? Yes, we have two. I think we only have time for one more question. Is that it? Yes, okay.
Yeah. So with all technologies, when we look back in history, we all have these rates of adoption, the way that society deals with them. So we have now AI, we had technologies like telephony, telegraphy, photography, all who have writing, publishing, printing, etc. And Zuckerberg is not new, of course. Back in the 1500s, Gutenberg was also a tech bro. So we all had these different technologies that we as society had to adopt. but the speed in which these digital technologies work this is a very high speed in which we have to cope as a society with these technologies. So do you think, looking back, are there lessons to be learned from earlier technologies about how they can be adopted as a society, how they can be more inclusive, be more part of our culture, and also allow us to incorporate it in human life with this current speed?
Yeah, so no, it's a good question about speed. Talking about speed, there's a sign called stop, but anyway, but okay, I will look. I mean, indeed, it's like, it's happening it feels like it's happening at a fast rate, but look at our social institutions. I mean, look at our universities. It's been around for like a century, the way we teach. We are like, just because they build it doesn't mean that we move as fast as technologies. We don't. And institutions move even slower. Sometimes you want to shake it up and say, can you move a little faster, So what does it take? And look, in many ways, we look at speed as something which is threatening our way of life, which is actually a reminder that it's a way of life we want to cherish, we hold dear. There's a lot of things that we actually genuinely value, and for good reason. And here's a reason for hope that we actually have something that to hold on to, versus if you are in many parts of the world, you don't want to be that lost generation because your teachers didn't show up to school. 1 in 3 kids don't even have basic reading and writing in Africa, because the teachers don't come to school, or they don't have access to decent teachers or languages, textbooks in their own languages, and they don't want to be the lost generation. For them, the speed is not fast enough. They need to get online, they need to catch up, because they are going to be the different generation. They are not going to be their parents, they're not going to be their grandparents. And so speed is, again, relative to the context, and we will stop.
Okay. Thank you so much, Payal. Thank you. And okay, everyone, we are going to take a short break of about half. I know. I didn't forget him. And when we come back from the short break, we will be experiencing a Winti musical formation called Warimbo Criollo, which will be led by artist and Winti practitioner sitting in the front seat, Yasir Linger, and renowned Winti high priestess, Marianne Markello. Can you please come forward? Just before we leave, just give us a few, and please, very short, because I don't want him screaming at me, but just let us know what to experience.
All the stop sign already and the time's up.
Okay, yeah.
Cannot see everybody in the crowd. Hi, everybody, and thank you, Payal, for the inspiring lecture. My name is Yasir Linger, and Akin basically said all of my text. So I'm just going to keep it short. After the break, you will see and hear about our Afro-Surinamese AI, which is our ancestral intelligence. So I hope you enjoy the break.
Very cool. All right. Okay, everyone. I was instructed to ask you to leave the room because there's going to be a tech setup. So please, just half an hour, and we come back here.